I sat there as Lisa's words hit me like a hammer. She wasn't happy and wanted a divorce. Though surprised, I couldn't deny there had been signs. After almost 25 years of marriage, she had been spending an unusual amount of time confiding in her friend Carla, who proudly called herself a marriage expert, though her credentials came from surviving 3 divorces. As I listened, I tried to stay calm. Lisa said she needed space, time to explore new opportunities, and the freedom to meet new people. She mentioned the court-mandated 90-day legal separation period, during which we'd both be free to date without it being considered cheating. I realized she didn't fully grasp that this freedom applied to me as well. It became clear that filing first would give either of us the upper hand in deciding whether to continue or stop the divorce process. I made it clear I'd file as well, just to ensure we were on equal footing. Although I had no intention of pursuing a divorce myself, I couldn't let her hold all the cards. Lisa reassured me that I wasn't a bad husband or father. In fact, she admitted I had been wonderful in those roles. Still, she felt unfulfilled and longed for more from life, more than I could apparently offer. When I asked if she had spoken to a lawyer yet, she mentioned planning to hire Tim Andrews, who had handled Carla's divorces. It all made sense. Carla's influence was driving this decision. In response, I told her I'd work with my cousin Amanda, a tough but compassionate lawyer who had once offered to represent me for free if I ever needed it. Lisa was clearly displeased by this choice, but didn't argue further. I suggested taking 2 weeks to prepare before officially starting the separation on the 1st of the month. It seemed practical to treat the separation as a trial period to see what life after divorce might actually look like. Lisa seemed uncertain, but agreed to the idea. As we moved to the kitchen, I brewed coffee and started jotting down notes. I told Lisa we needed to start by discussing how to explain the situation to our 2 daughters. She didn't think it was necessary to tell them right away, proposing instead to wait until the 90 days were up, or possibly not tell them at all if she changed her mind. I disagreed. The girls would inevitably have questions, and we needed to address them honestly while reassuring them that the divorce wasn't their fault. I also suggested that Lisa continue living in the house during the separation to maintain stability for the kids. Lisa raised concerns about the potential challenges of dating while still living under the same roof, noting the risk of resentment if one of us went out while the other stayed home. She also emphasized the importance of presenting an authentic post-divorce life to the kids without confusing them further. We both agreed that family and close friends needed to be informed to avoid rumors or misunderstandings. Lisa remained skeptical about how our daughters would handle the news, but I suggested professional counseling as a way to help them cope. I even joked that new partners might bring additional grandparents into the picture, which could mean more gifts for birthdays and holidays. Discretion, however, would be key. I made it clear that if we dated, we'd need to meet people outside the house. Bringing them home wasn't an option. As the discussion continued into the night, I felt a mix of sadness and determination. Lisa was ready to leave, but I wasn't going to let her dictate how this would unfold. For the first time, I began to see the pieces of a new life forming ahead of me, one where I'd find my own sense of freedom and fulfillment. The conversation had taken a sobering turn as Lisa and I began to discuss the realities of maintaining 2 separate households. The financial strain was unavoidable, and I explained that we both need to adjust to covering all expenses independently. Joint assets would need to be divided, accounts closed, and child support arrangements made. The list of considerations felt endless, but it was crucial to get everything in order before our separation officially began. Lisa sat in stunned silence as I continued laying out the logistics. I told her I'd look into renting an apartment closer to my office, ensuring there would be space for our daughters during my visitation time. The standard schedule in most divorces allowed for weekends and alternating holidays, though weeknight visits could be challenging with school commitments. She seemed surprised at my composure, noting how much time I still planned to spend with the girls despite the circumstances. I assured her that I would remain involved but emphasized that she and her future partner would need to take on responsibilities I currently handled. I mentioned the potential challenges, like ensuring consistency in the girls' routines, managing belongings across 2 homes, and handling transportation if my apartment wasn't on a school bus route. Lisa's face betrayed her frustration as she muttered something about how things weren't going as she'd expected. She admitted that her friend Carla had assured her I'd cave at the mention of divorce, agreeing to maintain the family structure while allowing her the freedom to date others. Instead, she found herself losing control of the situation. Stunned, she told me she needed rest and retreated to bed. I stayed up, unable to sleep, jotting down notes to ensure we covered every aspect of this new reality. By the time I finally went to the guest room to rest, the weight of the night's discussions still lingered. The next morning, Lisa woke up and immediately noticed I wasn't beside her. Assuming I had stayed up all night working on the list, she went to the kitchen, only to find a notepad on the table and me asleep in the guest room. As she began making breakfast, curiosity got the better of her, and she glanced at the notepad. The headings on the list were blunt: liabilities to change. It covered everything from mortgage adjustments, utilities, and insurance to smaller tasks like managing subscriptions and car maintenance. There was even a page detailing my anticipated expenses in the apartment, complete with a projected budget. The numbers clearly showed a shortfall each month, along with strategies I'd outlined to cut costs, including giving up my morning Starbucks and late-night Waffle House trips. She couldn't help but smirk at that part, but was less amused when she saw the breakdown of tasks she'd have to handle, from refueling the car and arranging repairs to managing grocery shopping and lawn care. Frustrated, Lisa set the notepad down, muttering about my refusal to play into her expectations. Determined to vent, she called Carla before I woke up. Lowering her voice, Lisa explained everything from the previous night. My calm agreement to the divorce, the detailed plans I had made, and my insistence on treating the separation as a genuine trial for post-divorce life. Carla's response was sharp. "Lisa, listen to me. He's bluffing. He's just trying to manipulate you, making you feel like he's in control. He won't actually follow through. Men like him rely on you to stay dependent. Remember, you control the kids and your bedroom. Those are the only tools you need to keep him in line. Trust me, he'll fall in line soon enough." Lisa hesitated, but clung to Carla's assurances. "I hope you're right," she whispered, "because this isn't going the way I thought it would." Her uncertainty lingered as she hung up, staring at the notepad on the kitchen table. She wasn't ready to admit it, but the balance of control was shifting, and she was no longer as confident about the path she'd chosen. Lisa sat across from me, visibly tense, as she mentioned hearing from Carol, a coworker, that I might be growing close to one of her new office partners, Nathan Miller. Carol had apparently noticed Nathan frequently stopping by Lisa's office and having lunch with her nearly every day. I asked Lisa what was really going on, pointing out that the company had strict policies against workplace relationships. Lisa dismissed the concern, claiming Nathan was just a friend. She admitted he was always kind to her, often complimenting her appearance, even when she didn't feel she looked her best. But her hesitation and body language told a different story. I pressed further, asking if there was anything happening between them that Nathan's wife wouldn't approve of. Lisa froze for a moment before stating that Nathan wasn't married. That caught my attention. I'd already done some digging and knew otherwise. Pulling out my phone, I showed her what I'd found. "This is Nathan Miller, right?" She nodded hesitantly. "Well, his social media profile says he's married to Olivia and has 2 children. This post was updated just a few days ago." Lisa stammered, claiming she had no idea Nathan was married. She insisted she would never knowingly interfere in someone else's marriage. I couldn't help myself and said, "But you seem fine interfering with ours." Her face went pale. After a long pause, she tried to deflect, suggesting Nathan was just one of a few men she might consider dating during the separation. She was clearly grasping for control of the conversation, but it was falling apart. To steer things back, Lisa brought up an unrelated point, suggesting that we exchange medical reports at the end of the separation to ensure everything was clear if either of us chose to date. I nodded, agreeing that it wasn't a bad idea, though I couldn't help feeling the conversation had taken an absurd turn. I decided to share updates about my preparations for the separation. I explained that I'd started handling practical matters like splitting our bank accounts, sorting out the mortgage payments, and adjusting utilities. I also mentioned my secretary, Hannah, who worked part-time managing a local apartment complex. She had told me about a nearby 2-bedroom unit available for rent. The price was steep, but if I agreed to help with maintenance, I could get a 50% discount, which would mean more funds for Lisa and the kids. Lisa's frustration was palpable, though she tried to hide it. I explained that Hannah had offered to help me secure the place and even mentioned she had some personal interest in me. I assured Lisa I'd turned her down, citing workplace rules, but it was clear the conversation only added to her unease. To top it all off, I shared another piece of news. I had booked a 10-day trip to Hawaii as a surprise for our anniversary, I told her. Her eyes lit up as she immediately began talking about how much she'd always wanted to go there. Before she could get too carried away, I clarified, "We're not going." Her face fell, and I explained. "When you mentioned divorce, I tried to cancel the trip, but the refund policy only allowed for 15%. Instead, I had the tickets transferred to your name. You can take someone else?" Lisa's voice cracked. "But I wanted to go to Hawaii with you. I've been thinking, and maybe I was wrong about wanting a divorce. I'm not as unhappy as I thought." I looked her in the eye, steadying myself. "Even if you change your mind now, Lisa, you can't take back what you said or the way you've made me feel. I can't forget the doubts you planted or the thoughts of you and Nathan, or anyone else. I've made my decision. I'm proceeding with the divorce." I left the room before she could respond, retreating to the guest bedroom to gather my thoughts. Alone, Lisa turned to the only person she felt could help her, Carol. Calling her in a panic, she recounted the events of the past few days. "Carol, it's all falling apart. Adam found an apartment, and even his secretary is flirting with him. My sister admitted she's interested in him. And to top it off, he had tickets to Hawaii for our anniversary, but gave them to me to use with someone else. He's serious about leaving." Carol, in her usual way, tried to calm her down, but it was clear Lisa was losing control of a situation she thought she could manage. I realized the conversation with Carla had only fueled Lisa's frustration. She was torn, muttering to herself about how the Hawaii trip was supposed to be her dream, but now she didn't even know who she'd take. Nathan was no longer an option, especially after learning about his wife and children moving into town. It was clear she didn't want to be in this situation. She wanted to be in Hawaii with me, the person she originally envisioned. Carla, of course, had filled Lisa's head with doubts about my intentions. She insisted the trip was nothing more than a manipulation tactic to guilt her into calling off the divorce. Lisa seemed to latch onto this idea, further deepening her resentment toward me. I could sense her anger building, her thoughts racing as she tried to regain control of a situation slipping further from her grasp. When I came downstairs with a small suitcase, Lisa's accusations started flying. She assumed I was trying to make it look like I was already moving out. I explained calmly that I was just taking a few things to the apartment to ease the eventual transition for the girls. The last thing I wanted was to overwhelm them by suddenly hauling everything out at once. Lisa, however, was far from understanding. It was obvious that she'd been talking to Carla again, and I made a passing comment about her so-called marriage expert. That only seemed to ignite her fury. Her words cut through the air as she claimed I'd concocted the Hawaii trip to manipulate her. She made it clear that she still intended to go through with the divorce, convinced she could easily find someone else to meet her needs. I acknowledged her statement, agreeing that she'd likely have no trouble attracting attention. But I corrected her assumptions about the trip, offering to prove the timeline behind my booking. I called the travel agency, putting the conversation on speaker. Lois, the travel agent, confirmed all the details, when I'd planned the trip, when I'd made the payment, and even when I'd attempted to cancel it. Her tone was sympathetic, expressing regret that I couldn't take the trip myself. She commended my gesture of transferring the tickets to Lisa, suggesting it was a testament to my character. Lisa, however, seemed unmoved. She dismissed the entire explanation, accusing me of conspiring with Lois to make her look bad. Rather than argue, I suggested Lisa talk to her parents. She looked confused, questioning their involvement, but I explained that they were supposed to watch the girls during the trip. I dialed them on the spot, and they answered with their usual warmth. When they mentioned how excited they'd been to have the girls stay with them, Lisa's expression shifted. It was clear she hadn't realized just how much thought had gone into planning the trip. Her parents' concern deepened when the topic of separation came up. They were supportive but urged Lisa to think carefully about her decision. They reminded her that good partners aren't easy to find, and they worried about the impact this would have on the family. As the conversation ended, Lisa was visibly shaken. I returned upstairs, leaving her to reflect on the reality of her choices and the consequences they would bring. I knew things had escalated, and Lisa's frantic tone confirmed just how much she was struggling to regain control. When I mentioned I wasn't going to lie to her parents, I could see the panic flash in her eyes. Lisa started talking fast, trying to smooth over the situation with her mom and dad. She explained how she only wanted a 90-day separation to find herself, explore new opportunities, and become a better wife and mother. It was the same story she'd been repeating, but this time, it sounded hollow even to her. Her father wasn't buying it. His voice carried the weight of disappointment as he questioned whether she had someone else in her life. Lisa quickly denied it, and I considered stepping in to confirm what I knew but decided against it. Harold, however, wasn't letting her off the hook. His words hit hard as he expressed his disappointment, and his wife's quiet sobs in the background only deepened the tension. Lisa, clearly rattled, tried to salvage the situation by insisting there would be no divorce or separation. She said she was taking back everything she'd said, but it was too late. The damage was done. I urged her to compose herself before the girls came home, then grabbed my suitcase to head to the apartment for the night. Her pleading began almost immediately. "Where are you going? Didn't you hear me? I don't want a divorce anymore. You don't have to go." But I couldn't ignore the reality of what she'd already put into motion. I told her plainly that she couldn't just undo everything with a single declaration. She'd initiated this without consulting me, and now she thought she could call it off just as easily. I reminded her that I had a voice in this too, and the events of the past week had left me questioning whether giving up on divorce was the right choice. I told her I'd spend the night at the apartment. Her desperation grew as she tried to convince me to stay. "Please don't go. I'm sorry. Can't we just move past this and go back to how things were?" she begged. But her words didn't hold the weight they might have before. I couldn't forget how she had admitted her unhappiness and entertained the idea of being with Nathan. I explained that my cousin and could draft the divorce papers quickly, and if necessary, she could even serve them at Lisa's workplace, ensuring plenty of witnesses. I brought up the possibility of talking to Nathan's wife as a form of retribution, but made it clear I wouldn't take things that far, for the sake of the girls. Lisa's tears flowed freely now. "Why are you being so harsh? I love you, and I know you love me. Is there anything I can do to make this right? You said divorce would hurt us both, so why not avoid it? Please, let's work this out." I stood silently, her words washing over me. She must have taken my stillness as a sign that she was getting through to me because she started making promises, big ones. She vowed to be the best wife in the world, to never look at another man, and reminded me of the nearly 2 decades we'd spent building a life together. She mentioned our 2 children and how she'd supported me through everything, even when my work kept me away. Finally, I spoke. I told her I would take my things to the apartment as planned, but offered her a chance to make amends. "Write down a few things for me," I said. "Your words and actions have caused me more pain than you realize. If your responses meet my expectations, I'll consider calling off or delaying the divorce. I'll come back at 7, and you might want to send the kids to their grandparents or friends so we can speak openly." Lisa agreed eagerly, asking what she should write. I laid it out clearly. "First, I want a genuine apology for starting this entire mess. I need you to beg for my forgiveness, not just ask, but plead sincerely. Second, I need you to contact Nathan and tell him to stop reaching out to you. Make it clear that there will be consequences if he doesn't." Her nods came quickly, and she promised to do whatever it took. For now, I left her with the task, hoping her words would reflect genuine regret rather than another attempt to manipulate the situation. As I walked out the door, I couldn't help but wonder if she truly understood the gravity of what had happened, or if this was just another ploy to maintain control. When I laid out the final terms, I was firm and resolute. I made it clear that if Nathan didn't comply, I wouldn't hesitate to take legal action against him and his employer. I told Lisa to list every reason why I should consider staying married to her, and as a final condition, she needed to cut ties with Carla permanently. I explained that if I ever found out Carla was influencing her again, I would leave without looking back. Lisa seemed shaken but agreed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'll do everything you asked and be ready by 7. With that, I picked up my suitcase and walked out. I needed time to think, away from her apologies and attempts to win me over. Lisa, left alone, dove into the tasks I'd given her. She rehearsed what she would say to Carla, eventually deciding on a sharp and definitive message. Listening to you was my worst mistake. Because of you, I almost lost everything. Don't contact me again. No calls, no texts, no emails. If we meet in public, steer clear of me. The act of writing and rehearsing those words seemed to bring her some relief, as if cutting Carla out was a step toward regaining control of her life. Next, she called Nathan. Her voice was icy as she relayed my instructions, warning him to stop all contact with her. He tried to argue, even suggesting they meet one last time, but she shut him down coldly. She made it clear that any further interference would result in me informing his wife of everything. With that task complete, she turned her focus to the most surprising challenge, listing reasons why I should stay. It turned out to be easier than she expected. Freed from her earlier confusion, she reflected on the life we'd built together, our shared joys, and the family we'd raised. She poured her heart into the list, expressing genuine remorse for her actions and acknowledging how selfish and misguided she had been. Never again, she wrote firmly at the end. As the clock neared 7, Lisa waited with a mix of nervousness and hope. When I arrived 5 minutes late, I saw her tense posture relax slightly, though her eyes still held uncertainty. She handed me the list she prepared, her hands shaking as she did so. I read through it carefully, noting the effort she'd put into her words. Tears began to form in my eyes as I absorbed what she'd written. She noticed and seemed to take it as a hopeful sign, rising from her seat as if to embrace me. I stopped her with a gesture. "This is impressive," I told her, my voice calm but heavy with emotion. "But I'm not sure you understand the depth of the hurt I've experienced. I think I have to go through with the divorce." Her reaction was immediate and heart-wrenching. She collapsed to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably, her words barely audible through her tears. "I've ruined my family. I'm the worst person alive. I don't deserve to live. How could I have been so blind?" I knelt beside her, my tone steady but firm. "Now you understand how I've felt." I moved toward the door, pausing as a thought crossed my mind. Without turning around, I asked, "During the separation, are we allowed to see other people?" Lisa, still overwhelmed by emotion, struggled to respond, her words caught in her sobs. I glanced back at her and continued, "If dating others is allowed, do you have plans for Friday night? Maybe we could have dinner and see a movie." She looked up at me, her face a mixture of confusion and hope. "You're asking me out on a date?" "Yes," I said simply. "I think our old relationship is broken, but maybe we can try starting something new." Her expression transformed, and she rushed toward me, tears still falling but now mixed with a small, hopeful smile. "Yes," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Over the next few months, things didn't magically fall into place, but there was progress, slow, deliberate, and sometimes painful. Lisa and I kept our separation intact, as we both felt it necessary to rebuild trust and redefine our roles in each other's lives. Our Friday night date led to a series of cautious outings, simple dinners, walks by the lake, and even a concert we both enjoyed. We didn't label it as fixing the marriage. It was more about rediscovering who we were as individuals and what we could be together. Lisa's effort to repair the damage was sincere. She cut all ties with Carla and confronted the toxic influence that had driven her decisions. She took responsibility for her actions, apologized to the girls, and even began seeing a counselor to better understand her own behavior. Her list of reasons for me to stay wasn't just words. It became a guide for her actions. I, too, had to reflect. While I'd been blindsided by her initial declaration, I realized that years of my own emotional distance and work-first mentality had created cracks in our relationship. I took accountability for my role in our drift and worked on being more present with Lisa and the kids. I even accepted that some of her grievances, while painful, weren't entirely without merit. We agreed to revisit the topic of divorce after the 90-day separation. Until then, I stayed in the apartment, though we spent more time together as a family. The girls were wary at first, but began to adjust to the new normal. They seemed happier seeing us make an effort to respect each other, even if we hadn't yet decided on the future. By the time the 90 days were up, we were at a crossroads. The easy path would have been to proceed with the divorce, to cut ties and start over separately. But life isn't about taking the easy path. It's about choosing the one you can live with, the one that holds meaning. On the last day of our separation, we met at the home we'd shared for so many years. The house felt different, quieter, almost hesitant, as if it too were waiting to see what we would decide. Sitting across from Lisa at the kitchen table, I felt a strange calm wash over me. "I've thought a lot about this," I began. "I've weighed every option, every possibility, and every memory. And the truth is, Lisa, I don't want a divorce. Not because it's easier to stay, but because I see the effort you've put in. I see how much you want to rebuild. And despite everything, I see the person I fell in love with." Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't speak. I continued, "This isn't forgiveness. That takes time. But it is a chance. A chance to start again, with the understanding that we both have to keep choosing each other every day." Lisa nodded, her voice trembling as she replied, "I'll spend the rest of my life proving to you that I'm worthy of this chance." And so, we didn't pick up where we left off. We started from scratch. We sold the house and moved into a smaller one, symbolizing a fresh beginning. The girls saw the changes and, over time, began to trust that we were committed to healing our family.